and we have Captain Rubio's son will be Zooming with us this morning. Hopefully. His daughter is at work, so she's going to watch it on live streaming. I think she is in Puerto Rico. So, and Bill Thomas, to avoid getting stuck at the tunnel, he went around from Newport News or Hampton, and he's stuck at the Berkeley Bridge, which is only 70 pictures. The traffic is backed up from here to eternity. So we're switching things around. We're going to have the convention states go first, and then Bill will come in after them. So at this point in time, I'd like to introduce United States retired Captain Kenny Gold will give us the invocation. If everybody would rise if they'd like to.
Please, if you would, join me in prayer. Our dearest Heavenly Father, we come to you today with thanksgiving for our wonderful country, our wonderful state, and our wonderful city. Today is Armed Forces Day, and we ask you to put a special blessing on the forces of our armed services, of the Army that may be deployed in many different places throughout the world and training here in the United States. Bless them and bless their families. Bless the Navy, as we know that every day, somewhere in the world, a Navy ship is plowing through the waters of the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Indian Ocean, in protection of our country. Bless the Marine Corps at the many bases they have, particularly the ones that I am associated with over in Okinawa, and how tough life is sometimes in some of these faraway places, and all the training that they do, and the flying that they do every day. Bless our United States Air Force, and know that 24 hours a day, there's some young airman in the air watching over our country, and our Coast Guardmen who go out in the worst weather, and you watch them go out and challenge this weather to rescue people and save their lives. Bless them, and bless all of our military families, and hold them in your hands and hold them dear. Bless our police force here today in Virginia Beach as they go through the dangerous jobs of taking care of our city streets. We ask all these things in your name and pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Kenny. And at this point in time, we would like to pay homage to Captain Rubio, Medal of Honor recipient, and if you would, Ryan. Following this presentation, if you remain sit down, we will be playing the service medley in honor of Armed Forces Day, and as your military organization is mentioned, please stand up and be recognized.
Do we want to do the Pledge of Allegiance first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Pledge of Allegiance, girls or ladies. Councilman Moss, would you like to lead the pledge, please? If you come over here, ladies, get on the screen. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much.
Captain Euripides Rubio was serving as the communications officer, 1st Battalion, when a numerically superior of some massive attack against the battalion defense position. Intense enemy machine gun fire raked the area while mortar rounds and rifle grenades exploded within the perimeter. Leaving the relative safety of his post, Captain Rubio received 2 serious wounds as he braved the withering fire to go to the area of most intense action, where he distributed ammunition and rendered aid to the wounded. Disregarding the painful wounds, he assumed command when a rifle company commander was medically evacuated. Captain Rubio was wounded a 3rd time as he exposed himself to devastating enemy fire while encouraging his men to fight. While aiding the evacuation of wounded personnel, he saw a smoke grenade, which was intended to mark the Viet Cong position for airstrikes, had landed too close to friendly lines. Captain Rubio ran to reposition the smoke grenade, but was immediately struck to his knees by enemy fire. Despite his wounds, Captain Rubio scooped up the grenade, ran through a deadly hail of fire to within 20 meters of the enemy position, and hurled the already smoking grenade into the midst of the enemy before he fell for the final time. Using the repositioned grenade as a marker, friendly airstrikes were directed to destroy the hostile positions. Captain Rubio's acts of heroism turned the tide of battle, and his extraordinary leadership and valor were a magnificent inspiration. Captain Rubio was awarded the Medal of Honor for his remarkable bravery and selfless concern for his men.
Thank you very much, Brian. The service medley, please.
All right.
And repeat, as your service organization is, comes up on the screen as part of this medley, please stand up to be recognized.
Now turn it up. Oh man. Bluetooth. Sponsor network. And to keep on the free. We know how to play the time.
Thank you, everyone, and all the families and that, and of course,
Pansies are hitting the road, and wherever they go, they'll be about 10 minutes from a hotel by.
I know.
Now a word from our sponsors.
Now a word from our sponsors. Also like to say, because of not just the families, but Councilman Moss just recently retired after 42 years serving with the United States Navy. Last position was at Submarine Forces Atlantic. So John is one of those honorary, and also has the Trident. That's not the Trident. What's it called? Dolphin. Dolphin. He's got the Dolphin. Very, very rare insignia that they presented to him. So thank you all for your services and all those who made sacrifices, your families. Let's hear it. Yes. And at this point in time, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. William Duke.
Go Bill.
Go Bill. Go Steelers.
We need to get 2 more songs, one for the Space Force, right? I don't know, that'll be a spacey.
Oh,
And
man.
there is another,
No,
there is
there's
another armed branch of the United States service.
The
The IRS, that's a good one. No, it's the U.S. Oceanographic Service.
Noah.
No, it's not NOAA.
Yes.
I mean, NOAA, it's a uniform service. They wear Coast Guard style uniforms. And it's a little different patch or something.
Yeah.
And they drive ships around and look for the bottom of the ocean. Anyway, there you go. Now, in order to avoid wasting any more of your time, I'll be brief. Russell Bayer, I'm sorry, I will never get his name right. Bayer. Russell Bayer is here today with a whole delegation of conventions of states people, convention of states, and he's going to tell us about it and hopefully allay your fears about runaway conventions, which is what so many people are afraid of when they think of a convention of the states. And he informed me today that the Convention of States had one great victory. Perhaps the most important amendment to the Constitution of the United States was the repeal of prohibition. And that was done through conventions. Anyway, and state legislatures. So we all have a great debt to the Founding Fathers for restoring our ability to drink to excess. Don't you think? They have no sense of humor, these people. Yeah.
Saving time, no more time.
Okay. He's from Richmond, and he is here to talk to us today, and if you have any questions, he'll be able to answer them for you. Thank you very much. Russell Bayer.
Hi. As you said, I'm Russ Bayer. I'm actually from New Kent County, pretty close to the horse track. So if you know where that is, halfway between Williamsburg and Richmond. But I had a business in Richmond, so I want to thank Dr. Duke and Mr. Dean for letting us come here. I want to recognize a couple of people. It looks like I brought a bunch of people to beat up on you, but these are just friends. John here is the state director. He drove down from Fredericksburg. Lillian and Teresa both live in the area here. And we've got Ty Greenhall back there, and his boss is sitting right next to him, Elliot Greenhall. So these are all folks I know that are pretty much on board with what we're talking about today.
Can we give them a hand?
We can, yes.
Thank you for coming.
And who knows, maybe they'll be back for another breakfast. So I'm assuming that you folks are pretty familiar with the Constitution, more so than some, I hope. So say what you will about the First Amendment. Yeah, that's the joke, right? Freedom of speech.
Oh, man. Downhill.
Yeah, I've used it twice. It's time to get a new one. So I grew up in the Midwest. You know, it's a kind of area where you might hear, you get a 3-foot snow overnight, and you'll hear shoveling early in the morning because your neighbor's helping scoop out. You get tree fall across your driveway, you know, the neighbors will come out with chainsaws, that type of thing. So that's kind of my background. The Navy got me out here. I actually lived over by, in the College Park area for many years, and eventually moved a little bit closer to my business in Richmond. But personal travel and Navy has taken me to almost every state and about 22 countries. And I didn't even go 20 years. I went 8 active, 5 reserves, and the business kind of overtook my life. So I'm an unpaid volunteer with Convention Estates. I'm not paid. Are you paid? You're not paid.
No.
Are you paid? None of us are paid. There's a couple people in the state that are, but they've moved up to national positions. It's a very frugal outfit. And I would like, some of you had questions about this for a long time. I was opposed to it. Convention State sounds real scary. Sounds like somebody's going to rewrite the whole book. And that's not the case, because what it actually is an intra-constitutional effort, not an extra-constitutional effort. I talked to some folks at Middle Resolution. Some of you may be familiar with them. It's a very conservative group out of Hanover. And they said they had it as part of their presentation. So I asked them, I said, well, what about the 10th Amendment? Because I like nullification at the time. I said, you may want to talk to a couple of people. So I talked to a couple of folks. They got me to look at some reference material, and I thought, son of a gun. I was a little bit off on that. And now I think this is the way to go. So I'm not here to change your minds. I just want to give you some things to think about. Sometimes people have to hear it or see it a couple of times to change your mind. But, and some of you may never, and that's okay. So Convention of States is actually a nonpartisan effort to grow the largest and most effective grassroots organization in the country. That's our mission. Our goal, one of our goals, is the Convention of States, but we've been active in a lot of other areas too, including school boards, local elections. Of course, we have to kind of uncoordinate ourselves with campaigns. We have to follow the election laws of each state and federal laws. So among the things we've done is door knocking, call campaigns. Right now we're making get out the vote calls to North Carolina using our telephone app. And I think, what have we done? Like 5,000-6,000 phone calls, something like that. We've got 30 states calling North Carolina, telling people to think properly to go vote. We influenced a few delegate elections this year without, on our own by doing get out the vote campaigns. So it's a number of things we do. The grassroots is the main thing. So I'll explain our mission and some of the goals here. I've got a little presentation he's going to run for me in a little bit. But what I hope to do is share why I and millions of others, we're well over 2 million petitions, about 5 million supporters in the country that support a Convention of States. 66,000 people in Virginia have signed our petition. When I started, it was about 4 or 5 years ago, and I think it was 18,000. And by the time I joined, they'd already passed it in the Virginia House. It didn't get through the Senate, so we reintroduce it every year. So if the technology is kind today, we'll go ahead and play a presentation here just a little bit. But I think the early part of it explains the problem, and I think you'll understand that more than many what the problem is. But just to quote Mark Levin, the federal government is the nation's largest creditor, debtor, lender, employer, consumer, contractor, grantor, property owner, tenant, insurer, healthcare provider, and pension guarantor. Moreover, with aggrandized police powers, what it does not control directly, it bans or mandates by regulation. I think that kind of sums it up. And my dad used to say, a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So, research yourself. I've got a number of books here. I'll go ahead and show you these before we play the presentation. But The Law of Article 5 is by Rob Natelson. He was a little bit skeptical of the Convention of States project. Went and did the research, actually went to the National Archives and pulled the commissions to the people who went to the Philadelphia Convention. And that's one of the reasons we know that Philadelphia was not the runaway that some of us were taught. They actually followed their commissions. 2 of the people that attended Philadelphia did not have permission to sign it. They went home. Virginia actually called for that convention a year earlier in Annapolis. And that allowed 7 states piled on before the Articles of Confederation Congress gave it their recommendation to meet. So it was a state sovereign issue. Another good book is Mark Levin's Liberty Amendments. It came out about the same time. It's kind of a providential thing. Yeah, Karen's got one back there too. Those two guys were on the radio together. Mark Levin was interviewing Mark Meckler. Meckler mentioned Convention of States, and Levin got a little high-pitched and texted him, changed the subject, said we're going to talk right after this. And it turned out they both kind of were looking at the same idea at the same time. And Mark Levin thought that someone had leaked his book because it hadn't been printed yet. Another book here is Tom Coburn, recently passed, who was one of our supporters and spokesman. Now it's Rick Santorum, who's on the road. So if you're ready to hit the presentation, go ahead. We'll get some questions afterwards, I'm sure. Go ahead. All right. So the problem is, as you well know, those three topics there, you can go ahead and hit the next button. The spending and the debt crisis, our national debt, you can hit the next one. And this was, the date here, I think, is March, if I'm not mistaken, and you're aware there's been a lot of spending since March, right? Doesn't seem to matter who the president is. It's, spending is done by Congress, but it's with a president's approval because of the veto power on bills. But you see, it doesn't really matter who's in there. It's continuing to go, and eventually it'll be a straight line. There's an economist named Herbert Stein, has one of his laws, one of his rules is that if something cannot continue, it will stop. Kind of obvious. Go ahead. So the mandatory spending is a big part of it. It's one way to be able to not vote for each bill is to make it a mandatory with mandatory increases and just go back and revisit it. It's an easy way to not have to make the decision, right? And you can move on. We have a lot of regulations. They've created agencies to create regulations so that Congress doesn't have to vote on it themselves. And that growth means that we've gone from 4 federal crimes to many, many other things you have to obey. The average person breaks 3 of these federal laws and regulations every day without even knowing it. Go ahead and hit it again. These are the laws passed by Congress. These are the regulations passed. Pretty amazing, huh? It stops eventually. Go ahead.
Is that in a year?
I think so, yeah. Yeah.
People like us, people that are frustrated in Washington, D.C., often say, well, they don't follow the Constitution anyway. Not true. They follow the wrong one. They're following the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court, rather than the Constitution as written.
This, taken out of my pocket, is a pocket constitution. 4,000 words in the original document, 4,400 words. If you count the amendments, we're talking about 7,000 words. But here is the Constitution in force today. This is 3,000 pages of Supreme Court ruling showing every ruling has done to the original words. This isn't going to get any smaller. In fact, every time that a bunch the back for additional rulings that they know are coming. Every page in this document means a grant of power to the federal government. Understand that this is the Constitution in operation today. And unless wording crystal clear, we're going to continue to operate under this document forever and ever until the whole house of cards comes falling down.
Okay. So what he was explaining there is in the back of the book there's a few empty pages, and that's because there are some changes coming down the pipe. I actually bought one of the supplements. Now this is a 2012 edition. They print the book itself supposedly every 10 years. I suspect it'll only be PDF available right now. You can't buy it. But I went ahead and bought it because it had a sale at the government printing office. It's usually like $395. It was $145. So In the back, as I said, there's some empty pages because I suspect they buy the binders ahead of time and they know some changes are coming. If they do print it, it's going to be a bit larger. But every 2 years, you can figure about 140 to 160 extra pages added to this. So add an inch or two to this, and we'll see what it looks like when it rolls out. This is what we started with. And in the big one here, this is the one they hand to your congressman when he checks in to go to work the first time. This is the one they follow. In here is the story of Wickard versus Filburn. In that case, back in the 40s, a man was told that he was subject to the Federal Commerce Clause because he grew wheat on his own land to feed to his own animals. They said, how could that be? Because he exceeded his quota, apparently. He went to the Supreme Court. They decided that he had exceeded his quota and he was subject to the Commerce Clause because if he hadn't raised it on his own land, he might have bought it on the open market. And if he might have bought it on the open market, it may have crossed state lines. And that's the basis for regulating things even within a state, even on your farm. Go ahead.
People like us, people that are frustrated in Washington, D.C., often say, well, they don't follow the Constitution anyway.
One more time.
Not true.
One more time.
Yeah, I think it was replaying. Okay, so next step here is term limits. As you know, there's some people that have been there quite a while. Tell yourself that these folks were the best and the brightest from their states, their districts, for that long. It's not likely. As it is right now, there are very few people that have to flip back and forth, to convince to get something passed or opposed. And it shouldn't be that way. The founders intended that it would be a constant turnover in the people's house, right? Farmers, they couldn't wait to get back to their farms. It shouldn't be a profession staying in Congress. Go ahead. So with a re-election rate of nearly 95%, it's pretty easy to stay in if you're an incumbent. The other 5% are people that decided they'd had enough, opened up the seat. A few of them get beat, but not very many. And the average tenure is continuing to rise. Okay? So what's the solution? Go ahead.
The 15th of September, 2 days before they signed the document, the end of 4 long, hot months in Philadelphia. They were ready to go home. But George Mason noticed that Article 5 only had a single method for amending the Constitution. He said, wait a minute, what if Congress becomes an obstacle?
Given to us by George Mason, who said, look at guys, someday this government's going to abuse its power, and there won't be anything for you ever by Congress to reduce the power of the federal government. So we need to give the states the ability to reduce the power of the federal government.
Okay, so you get the idea. It was just a couple of days before the end of the Philadelphia Convention. They said, "Hey, we've made a terrible mistake." The founders trusted no one, right? They put so many checks and balances. It's the one thing that makes the United States unique. because we're one of the countries that put so many checks and balances. It's one of the reasons we're still here. They trusted no one, and they've actually made our state delegates the most important part of the federal system, because our state legislatures can create the convention that proposes amendments to the Constitution and pass it. Congress can't do that. They can propose it. It still needs to be ratified by the states. So, as you see here in the text, there's two ways to propose amendments. Congress is one, the states are another. There's two ways to ratify a convention, an amendment. They can do it by state conventions, and they can do it through the legislatures. So there's four combinations of things that can be done, and Dr. Duke mentioned the prohibition. That was one where when it was repealed, they had the states ratify it by convention, and the reason was they wanted to make darn sure that that's really what the people wanted, because they kind of goofed up by passing it, right? And that's on page 15 of these pocket constitutions, if anybody wants to read it. And we've got a bunch of copies here as well. You probably have some. Go ahead. So our plan is to use a subject convention. We're limited to discussing federal term limits, federal fiscal restraints, and federal overreach. Those are the only three topics they can consider. Okay? Do we get it? So the people have to contact their legislators to get this in progress. There have been over 400 attempts to do this. No one has ever reached 34 states. It's actually 2/3 required. Right now with 50 states, we need 34 states with a similar application in the operative language. So our application is one of the first attempts to do that. And Congress has to call the convention. We'll discuss that in a bit. But Congress and the states have a convenient competition of ambitions, right? The states want to retain their power or pull some of their power back. The Congress wants to keep what they have. Congress gets to aggregate these, so they will look for any reason to not count them as the 34. So this is a really dedicated effort to make matching applications possible and get the total. Once you get the COS applications passed in the states, you got to hit 34 states, allows the states to meet. History, legal precedents, number of court cases, all define how that's done. Each state gets one vote. All they're allowed to do is propose amendments. If you read the Article 5 carefully, they can't pass it. They're proposing it. And it's to be part of this Constitution. We're talking about the little guy, right? Not the big one. Go ahead. So when the convention is called, 34 states, you can send as many delegates as you want, but any state gets one vote in the convention. Historically, we've met about 34 times, or over 40, I think now is the recent count. And it goes all the way back. This book is really good. It's a legal treatise written by Rob Nadelson, a history professor. The records from the following meetings are particularly helpful. It starts with the Albany Congress, the Stamp Act, the First Continental Congress, on, Philadelphia Price Convention, Boston Convention, and goes all the way up to 2017 when states met. These are all times that the states met and stuck to the script. So they've met many times. They use the same process. They elect a leader, they select the rules, whether it's Robert's Rules of Order or Mason's Rules, which a lot of legislatures use. Go ahead. All they're allowed to do is propose amendments. You may or may not be aware that there was a simulation in Williamsburg not too long ago, and they had people from all 50 states. Some of them were current, some of them were former legislators, some of them were citizens, and it was a mock convention. They gave each of them those three topics, 3 committees, each supposed to come up with 3 amendments, and they couldn't even come up with the 9. They came up with 8. In about 2 hours, they passed a term limits amendment on the floor, slapping backs, high-fiving each other, and then someone pointed out that it wasn't real because it was so easy to pass the term limits. Go ahead. So the proposed amendments are only ratified if 38 states have done so, either by convention, probably by legislatures. If you think about it, there are 99 state bodies. Most states have 2 houses. Nebraska is different. They've got 1, the unicameral. So there's 99 houses in state legislatures across the nation. To ratify it requires both houses of a particular state to ratify it. That means 13 bodies out of those 99 can kill the stupid stuff, right? Within the convention, if they propose something that's not among the 3 topics, it's out of order. It can't be considered. And then you've got to get through 38 states. So my challenge to you is choose the amendment that you would not like to see passed, that you think 26 states would propose and 38 states would ratify. I can't think of one. Okay? Once you ratify it, of course, the Constitution's amended. Next. So our strategy is this. That's our model resolution. I actually brought our last one here. And is Mr. Thomas nearby? I don't want to. Hey, there he is. Okay. I've got a copy of our resolution from the last year, HJ3. And we try to stick to the same operative language, very minor modifications between the states, but we want it to match. Okay? This is basically the section of the operative language. Fiscal restraints, federal government, limit the power and jurisdiction, and limit the terms of office. Now, who among you think that, let's say the Supreme Court, should they be sitting on the bench with IV bottles after 30, 40 years? Not likely. The Constitution says it was during times of good behavior. It doesn't say lifetime. It says during good behavior. And who knows, maybe 20, 25 years is good enough. All right? As I said, we're building the nation's largest grassroots army. We're in every voting district in the country. Next. Here's polling across the states. The polling in Virginia, 61%, once they know what a convention of states is all about and overcome the fear of supposed runaway. The real runaway, by the way, takes place every day that they're active in District of Columbia, right? But we've got 75% of the Republicans, 55% of the Democrats, and 62% of the other in favor of the convention states in those polls. This was done by Trafalgar, I think, did most of them. We've got the polling information here somewhere. Okay? So we've got a number of endorsements. Mark Levin, obviously. You can go ahead. James Dobson, go ahead. Rick Santorum is our spokesman right now. And it goes on and on and on. We don't seek the endorsements. You can find it on the website, but Ben Shapiro, when we had the convention, or a leadership summit here in Williamsburg area in 2019, we had Pete Hegseth, Charles Cooper was the NRA-ILA litigator for the Supreme Court, David Barton from Wall Builders, and Mark Levin closed the place. So it was a good bunch of people. Now, you saw the video with the constitutions, the 2 constitutions. The first gentleman was Mike Ferris. He's one of the co-founders with Mark Meckler. He's now with Alliance Defending Freedom. The other fella teaches a constitution course, lives in Yorktown. So I've got a flyer from an old one here, but if you call his number, he'll move around. He drives around the country, or around the state anyway, for sure. So we've got time for questions, I guess, but I don't want to take too long because Mr. Thomas is here. Yeah.
Hey, could you come up to the microphone, please?
Oh yeah, questions on the mic.
He said the
Closer.
closer?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
better? He said it was limited by subject. Who determines the subject?
The application. The legislators supply the application. The application